Hello and welcome back, Sharkers, to another episode of Deep Dives with Sharks. I am Alex. I am the host here. I did not get washed away by one or two hurricanes. I somehow made it. But speaking of, Hurricane Milton did decide it was going to come right for us, and as a northerner, I just kind of decided I wasn't going to play with that, so I left. Thankfully, we didn't face any losses or damage. Goalie was out in California during it, so she was okay over there, and thankfully we came back and everything was pretty good in our life, which was nice. Unfortunately, some people did get hit pretty hard, so I am going to ask that if you guys please can consider donating to the Red Cross or other organizations that are aiding victims of the hurricanes, which I will link in the description of this episode, as of course we did do all right, and you guys did check in, which I do really appreciate. But some people did lose quite a bit in those storms, and of course, if you can give back, that'd be fantastic, but no pressure if not. I did want to thank you guys for checking in, making sure that me and my family were all right. We all did very good. The rest of my family was up in Maryland, so they weren't affected really at all, which is great. And then everyone that's down here, all of our friends made it out all right too. So thankfully there weren't a whole lot of losses there. But I did want to thank you guys for that. And of course, if you guys want to follow along for more details on the podcast or on the stream that I've been doing, you can follow along on Instagram at Deep Dives with Sharks. Twitch is the same name there. And Twitter, you can go to Deep Dive Sharks, although I'm very bad at updating that. And I'm going to try to do a little bit better, but I still don't use Twitter a whole lot. So work in progress. We'll see what happens. But getting into the shark that we have for this week, we have the salmon shark. Now, the salmon shark is a member of the mackerel shark family, which includes the great white, the goblin sharks, and basking sharks as well. Salmon sharks are grayish-black in color, but they have a white belly, as many sharks tend to. This is what their counter shading is, so that way it looks like it's the sunlight from below or the dark depths when looking from above. Now, these sharks do get black spots that appear as they age, so the juveniles tend not to have the spots unless they are stressed with life's issues, such as taxes or bills. Things that sharks are typically stressed out about. They look like a squished great white or a slightly elongated porbeagle, which I'm very excited to do an episode on porbeagles coming sometime in the future, and I cannot wait to find out that porbeagles are actually longer than salmon sharks, so therefore they're not elongated at all. But the face is very squished as well. It is rather short. They have large black eyes, gills that sit a little back than where they typically are found on other sharks, and a longer body with a tall dorsal fin that sits a little bit lower on their back as well. Their eyes are also angled more forward than other sharks, which gives them binocular vision, which is similar to a human, although their eyes are placed a little bit further on the side of their head. So a little bit larger field of vision. We have about 180 degrees. They go a little bit further, closer to 200. They grow to be around 6.6 to 8.6 feet, or 200 to 260 centimeters, and can weigh about 485 pounds or 220 kilograms. So they're not necessarily huge. They're around the average length that sharks tend to grow to. The largest confirmed individual was 10 feet or 3 meters. Which, of course, in comparison to other sharks like great whites that can grow to be 24 feet, whale sharks, of course, that can grow up in the 40s, 50s, even 60s, and there's just others that tend to grow anywhere about 14, 15, 16 feet. These sharks aren't huge, but of course they're not as small as cookie cutter or dwarf lantern sharks, which are about not even a foot long, so varies there quite a bit. Now, the salmon shark is typically found in the Pacific Ocean in the northern hemisphere in offshore waters. So really about subarctic to subtropic waters. Some countries they live around include Japan, the US, mostly around Alaska, Canada, Russia, China, and the Korean Peninsula. Humans don't often come in contact with these sharks as they are offshore, and humans don't tend to be offshore quite a bit. They're also not a commercial fish. There's not a commercial market for them, which is rather rare among sharks, especially since many sharks are caught for a variety of reasons. But the skin and heart are seen as delicacies in Japan, although they are not caught in mass for consumption. They are actually known as a nuisance among commercial fisheries, as they often damage fishing gear going after the fisher's catch. They can sometimes get caught as bycatch, but more often than not, they're getting one over on the fisheries versus getting got by the fisheries. So, to explain that in not weird terms, they usually do more damage to the boats and the nets than the nets and the boats can do to them. They do tend to eat salmon, which is how they got their name, but they also eat squid, sablefish, which look rather interesting, definitely worth a look up, and herring. And as you may know, salmon and herring do tend to make up quite a big portion of fishing industries, so when salmon sharks are going after them, they tend to bite into nets, and that can cause the fishing gear to get damaged, so connecting the two dots there. Now, sports fishers in Alaska and Canada will try to catch salmon sharks, but they are limited to only 2 a year or 1 a day, depending on the jurisdiction they are in. Now, 1 a day does tend to sound like a lot, especially when there's 365 days in a year, or, of course, if it's a leap year, 366. But in the grand scheme of things, getting 365 sharks out of the whole population is not a whole lot. Now, mind you, that is quite a bit. But also, sports fishers don't tend to go out every single day, so they're not going to really catch 365 sharks. Plus, it's not even guaranteed they'll get a catch that day. So, even if they do somehow manage to go out every single day, they might not get one. Or if they get 2 that day, they can only keep 1. So it does help to limit the numbers, so that way they do not plummet and the shark does not go into any sort of danger area population number-wise. Now, there have been a few reports of individuals being bitten by salmon sharks. Of course, when you are fishing for them, you tend to come in contact a bit more. Fisheries trying to get them away from nets. There's a food source, they're in hunting mode, they might bite you. But for the most part, the numbers are generally low. The food source of these sharks has declined, which has caused the salmon sharks to hunt outside of their typical menu a bit and also driven them into some areas a little bit closer to shore, but thankfully they're not quite knocking on our doorstep like other sharks, such as the angular rough shark, which has been pushed rather close to shore. These sharks are also under least concern when it comes to conservation status. They have been doing very well out in the wild. They don't come in contact with humans a whole lot. They don't go and get hunted by a lot of predators, and they reproduce pretty well, which they are ovoviviparous, which means that they have eggs internally that hatch and then they give birth later. So their numbers are doing pretty well, and thankfully there's not a market to hunt them or go after them, so they're doing pretty great, which is fantastic. But that, of course, is what I have for the salmon shark for this week. If you guys have any questions or want anything clarified or anything like that, feel free to send it over on Instagram or pop in Twitch chat or send it over on Twitter. Of course, the handles were mentioned earlier, but once again, it is Deep Dives with Sharks or Deep Dive Sharks. You'll see the same logo there. But going into shark safety. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about with this, of course, does come on the back of people asking, well, we've got the portions where we talk about how to be safe around sharks and how to help individual sharks, and we've even talked about how to protect sharks in our daily lives, but we're not really looking at the whole picture. How are we protecting sharks overall? So that is exactly what we're going to look at today. And of course, the main article I used was by the NOAA Fisheries, which is NOAA. Firstly, there are many agencies that have been working to help protect sharks, and that goes all the way from NOAA, which is the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, Shark Trust, Project Aware, and Shark Alliance, just to name a couple of them. Now, these agencies vary in size, but have been instrumental in shark conservation. Sharks do tend to rule the oceans, being an apex predator and all, helping ecosystems stay in balance through controlling fish populations. But humans decided one day they wanted to wade into the water and touch things because we never keep our hands to ourselves. It's rather rude. We got to stop doing that. But humans overfished and overhunted many animals into extinction or being endangered. Thankfully, other humans came along and realized the importance of animals and nature and are trying to put an end to all of that. NOAA has worked to protect over 20 species of sharks within the U.S. and has worked with other countries to set up protections across many oceans. Now, you may have recently heard of NOAA a bit, as they do help to track and monitor hurricanes, and as we started this episode, it's hurricane season. Quite a few have been forming, so they've been mentioned quite a bit in the recent news. NOAA oversees the commercial and recreational fishing in the U.S., meaning they can limit how many fish are caught legally. This, of course, they can try to limit poaching, but that becomes a whole another different conversation. They also partner with the DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources, on enforcement of regulations as well as regulation adjustment. Outside of the U.S., many organizations have come together to aim to limit the number of sharks caught in different countries, including those that frequently consume sharks for a variety of reasons. Some organizations were able to introduce imitation shark meat to countries that frequently consume shark fin soup, which has had some success. Although similar to Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers, some people just feel like it doesn't replicate the original enough to be worth trying and or continuing to consume. For me personally, when it comes to Impossible Burgers or Beyond Meat, anything like that I've tried, I feel that it tastes pretty similar to what it is aiming to be. I do love a good cheeseburger, of course, and I am now realizing I should probably be eating more Impossible Burgers than regular burgers since they help the environment and have some health benefits. But they also do have a buttload of sodium, but win some, lose most. Which a quick shout out to Grass, Gino, and Amelia for the amazing phrase. And I don't even know if they listen to this, but if they do, I'm still using that phrase, guys. Thanks. But of course, you may be thinking, so really the only hope I have is to just hope an organization can set up regulations to protect sharks? Well, not really. As previously mentioned, you can support companies and products that do not utilize shark bits or contribute to overfishing practices, which is why you got to check what you are buying. You can also write local legislators to push for more protections for sharks and for our oceans overall. I am planning on flooding my local legislators with so many letters about protecting sharks and all around Florida, especially with the upcoming election, which I do need to go into a minor political rant once again. So if you are living in the U.S., of course, as you know, the election is coming up November 5th, and all I got to say is just please go vote, and please go vote for those that will protect the environment and the sharks and the oceans. I don't see how we could all be here, listening to this podcast, spending time together, having a good time. I assume we all love sharks and the oceans and things like that. And then look at all this and figure that you need to vote for someone who's not going to do anything to protect those things. So all I'm asking, please go out there, have your voice be heard. If you're outside the U.S., sorry, this doesn't pertain to you at the moment, but when your elections do come up, if you have those, please support politicians and local leaders who will help to protect the oceans and the sharks around us. That's how far political I'm going to go with that. But that, of course, is what I have for the safety segment of this episode. Once again, if you guys have any topics or anything you want me to talk about or anything like that, send them over on social media. I'll also eventually get an email if you guys would be more comfortable doing that. I think I have one. It might be deepdiveswithsharks@gmail.com. I'll double check that and update that in a little bit. But I'll also put that in the link of this episode description. So you guys have another option to reach out to me, which is fantastic. But going on to shark news. Now, we do have two stories once again. The first one is that UCSB researchers use drones to develop shark prediction technology, and this comes from KCBX-FM, Central Coast Public Radio, which I could probably do a better radio voice, but I'm just trying to read this because I've messed up recording it 16 times, so that's fun. But as the title says, University of California, Santa Barbara is trying to create shark prediction technology by monitoring ocean water conditions that would be favorable for sharks. Now, they're mostly utilizing drones currently to monitor where the sharks are going, but there is already a lot of technology out there, such as acoustic tags and things like that, that are monitoring the sharks directly. So, of course, this hasn't fully helped to prevent shark bites. It's probably limited a few, but for the most part, it hasn't really stopped anyone from getting in the water or anything like that. So they figured, why are we only looking at the sharks instead of what brings sharks towards shore, which tends to be that warm water that comes to the surface, especially as deeper waters tend to cool. So all that water gets pushed towards the surface, makes it nice and kind of like a bathtub. If you guys have ever had a really rough day and then the shark here has decided, I'm just going to hang out, have a nice little bubble bath and calm down. It's usually nice and warm. Well, when that surface water gets really nice and warm, that's when sharks tend to come up and they get to have their own little bath, as some would imagine. But this, of course, can bring sharks closer to shore as the water will be warmer the shallower it gets. So then they get closer and closer to the beach. Now, monitoring for things such as current, water temperature, food population, things like that, if their food is coming closer to shore and the warm water is coming closer to shore, you've got a pretty good equation for a shark to come closer to shore. Now, this doesn't mean that they're going to start closing beaches or anything like that. We're not having the Amity Island where we're just going to close the beach because there was a shark. That's not the greatest idea, although in that movie, they should have probably closed the beach for a little bit because that shark was... he was nuts. There's nothing better I can say about Jaws. Jaws was just nuts. But with this, it's not to close beaches or to ruin anyone's fun. It's more to make sure that we can try to limit the number of bites and make sure that people are able to be informed before they get into the water and things like that. Because oftentimes people may notice, oh, there's an uptick in shark bites, but not realize where it's coming from, and they'll still go in the water thinking, well, it can't happen to me. But there have been quite a few. We still aren't outside of the national average or anything like that. And as, of course, the seasons begin to change, those shark bites will go down again. It's more of a density problem, as we talked about earlier, rather than sharks are going crazy and trying to bite everyone, which rather nice. But hopefully with this technology, they'll be able to alert local authorities, so that way signs can be put up warning people that there are favorable conditions for a shark to be closer to shore, so that way people can be well informed before they get into the water versus having to see someone get bit and then your only reaction is to run away or try to help, which, once again, as always, please do not put yourself in danger if things are already handled or if you feel that you are not equipped to handle the situation. Make sure you keep yourself safe. Everyone asked me that quite a bit. I don't want you to put yourself in danger to save a shark or save someone else. You have to save yourself sometimes. But that's what I have to say about that. Now, going into our next topic, we have teen surfer survives shark bite in Florida, and this one was reported by the Inertia. Now, I do really like how they presented this article. They don't focus on how terrifying the experience was or that the shark is a monster or that it was an attack. They call it a bite and present it pretty factually. So to go over it very factually, a 16-year-old surfer had fallen off his board and was reaching to get back on when a 5-foot bull shark decided to grab onto his arm for a couple seconds and then let go. The surfer began paddling back to shore, yelling for help, and only focusing on the fact that he needs to get back to shore to get help. He did catch himself realizing that he was bleeding pretty bad and could attract another shark, but sharks tend not to go back due to a lot of commotion. Usually when there's yelling, screaming, things like that, they tend to not want to be involved in that. And also, especially since it wasn't a good meal, the shark wasn't about it. So thankfully he was all right and did not get bit a second time. He was able to get back to shore where they were able to stop the bleeding by tying a tourniquet by his shoulder, which I did mention before. Tourniquets are very helpful. Definitely look into how to use those properly. But thankfully he was okay. They were able to stop the bleeding and then get him over to the hospital, where they found he did not have any ligament or tendon damage and would be able to make a full recovery. He stated he plans on returning to the water as soon as he is able to, noting he didn't want a small bite, well, a small speed bump as he changed it to control his life. So on this, the story really focused on the facts of what happened, without adding a lot of fluff or filler about how terrifying the shark was or how horrible the incident could have been. Of course, the incident could have been much worse, and I'm very glad that it was not, but a lot of times you'll see different news stories talk about how horrifying and how terrible and the screaming and all the blood and everything like that. And it's like, yes, like this does happen during a shark bite. But at the same time, we're out here kind of villainizing sharks for being a shark. Like they're trying to figure out what we are, and they kind of took a little bite and realized, oh snap, they're really fragile. That's not great. So I love stories when they report like this. They tell you what happened, where it happened, what the outcome was, and how the person's doing. And thankfully, in this case, the surfer seems to be doing very well. I do, of course, know that it will take time for him to get back in the water, but I'm hoping it happens faster than he thinks it will, and I'm hoping it happens very soon. But, of course, this is one of those situations where it was reported very well. It seems like the surfer's doing great, and it's kind of just a best of a bad outcome, or best of a bad situation, I should say. It was a good outcome. But yeah, one of those best of a bad situation moments, because yes, this is unfortunate, but it wasn't really hyped up in the reporting, and thankfully the injury was minor at most with this. Like it's going to take some recovery and some time to heal, but it was very, very good outcome of this, and I wish him a speedy recovery there. But that, of course, is what I have for this episode. I want to thank you all for listening and tuning in and sending all your things and all your love and everything there. You guys are absolutely incredible, and I know I thank you constantly, but once again, it's just wild to me that I get to talk about sharks and y'all want to listen and send me more sharks to talk about, which I really, really appreciate. So, of course, thank you all there. Follow on Instagram or Twitch at Deep Dives with Sharks to get more sharky content there. And, of course, on Twitter at Deep Dive Sharks, which I think I need to update a whole bunch. So we'll see what happens there. But feel free to send in any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And, of course, give us a rating on Apple, Spotify, anywhere where you're listening. The higher the rating, the more likely it is to pop up when people search for shark podcasts, and hopefully we'll get more listeners, grow the shark cures a little bit more, and of course also the Sharky Bobs. But you guys take care, be kind to each other, and I will see you in the next one.